Hi, I'm Dr. Trites, and occasionally in our office we get a phone call or an email that says, "Hey, what blood markers do you run?" Just for whatever. And that's a very open-ended question because in the neighborhood of 3,600 different blood work markers do we use, but it's individualized to the case based on the history. What's the history? I mean, 60% of what I might consider or our office considers for blood work is based on history. Then if somebody's remote, that's kind of what we have to go on. Then another 20-30% of it is based on physical exam. So if somebody circles, I've got all these things for vascularity and we run vascular testing in the office and they're all normal. I don't need to go deep inside of that yet. Those things physiologically are okay. So it'd be hard for us to say, okay, all your blood vitals are fine, but let's say your blood pressure is fine. But I want you to have a heart workup because you have one palpation or palpitation a month. That's not appropriate. But there are other cases that maybe all your vitals are fine, but I'm sitting here going, watching your heart rate go from here to here to here to here to here to here as you're just sitting there. So that opens up a different set of testing that comes along. But really, what we start with, have like a basic panel, but in this basic panel, what I like to see are inflammatory markers, and the inflammatory markers that we look at. The first one might be what's called C-reactive protein. It can be intravascular inflammation, but what it also says is maybe the cardiovascular system doesn't repair as well as it should. And really anything over 10 means that it's not. So what do you do about it? There's a way to help it. Now, a lot of doctors don't run homocysteine because it's a form of B12 and folate, not just your average B12, that can really bring this down. We see it clinically. We try other B12s, it doesn't work. They're on a B12, it doesn't work. They're on a folate, it doesn't work. And then they use one that's specific for that, and we see it come down. And we want to get them to a low a certain number. So homocysteine can clinically is about 20 times more inflammatory, or tells a story 20 times more than LDL, which is only like a 4 times risk factor. It's important. It's in every cell of your body, so it can't be all bad. But there are inflammatory parts of LDL, and then you can run something called an LDL oxidation on that, but we don't run that all the time. So if we're looking like, what do I got to know? I want to know about C-reactive protein. I want to know about intravascular inflammation. I want to know if you can heal. Homocysteine can tell me that. Um, and so often we run insulin too. So there's differences in insulin. You can run a fasting insulin. You can run a non-fasting insulin. So fasting insulin, if it's above 12, you're already having some insulin issues. And does that mean insulin resistant? No. You have to have some other markers to it. Triglycerides have to be elevated. You have to have symptoms that come along with it. And then there's something called an IHOMA test, which really does tell us about insulin resistance. And you can do that from a mathematical calculation based on what's called metadata analysis. They take like 100,000 people and they go, we're going to see if we can find a shortcut. If somebody said insulin run and glucose run, we're going to do a calculation. We're going to figure out what the variable is, and we're going to add those variables, and then we're going to give a reference range. And if it's above 3, they got insulin resistance. Below 2, they're not. If it's between them, they're on their way. So do something about it. So that's a pretty good test when we use fasting insulin. But what we're usually really using non-fasting glucose is to see what your response for food is. It's a little bit different than what happened in the last 12 hours. And somebody's insulin might just go off the chart, 50, 80, 100, and they're non-fasting, which really tells us, hey, there's some other things that are going on. Now, when it comes to non-alcoholic fatty liver, sometimes the liver enzymes are elevated, but to get a little bit more detailed, there are 2 tests that we like to look at. GGT is one of them, and uric acid is another one. Now, uric acid is typically reserved for gout, and it has to be above 8, but really if it's above 5.5, or if the GGT is elevated, you can tell us a little bit more about the fatty liver. Now, there's even more testing that we can get into the fatty liver test to see what the level of it is. There's different stages of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as it gets to NASH syndrome, as it gets infiltrated, as it becomes cirrhosis, and even different levels of that. So there are quite a bit more testing. But what if we're looking for to see whether somebody knows they have it or not, because the percentage is getting fairly high in the United States? And by the way, fatty liver disease, again, most people don't even drink alcohol. It's from other things. It's from carbs, from your processing. It's from metabolic syndromes that can get on there. So uric acid often is there. You can't process any sugar, or if it's high fructose corn syrup, or maybe you drink too much pop. These things can elevate it. Even something like aspartame can changes the microbiome. It creates a metabolite. There are other things that happen, and so you can get non-alcoholic fatty liver from other things that may not just be derivatives of sugar. Now, Um, because Hashimoto's is the #1 autoimmune condition in the world, there are two antibodies, a TPO antibody and a thyroglobulin antibody, they would like to screen for, because most people don't usually go to the doctor just for, hey, what's up? Uh, they're, they're there for something doesn't feel good. I have headaches, my back hurts, I have this rash, my hormones are crazy, I break out all the time. When I eat food, I puke all the. Those are fun ones. But we want to make sure that that's not it, because it's so common. It needs to be taken care of now. And keep in mind that, let's say a person over here has 10 antibodies and they're positive, and this person over here has 10,000 antibodies and they're positive. Who's worse? Antibodies don't exactly tell us that. These other tests that we're talking about, such as ferritin or non-fasting or fasting insulin, and what's going on in the fatty liver, tell us more about what systemically is going on. And that's also what can be on the C-reactive protein. Or if somebody's looking for inflammatory responses, they might run an erythrocyte sedimentation rate, or even other antibodies that go along with autoimmune conditions. Those are pretty much our main inflammatory testing that we do. Not that LDL doesn't show inflammation, not that the gluten test wouldn't show some form of inflammation, or cortisol too high or too low doesn't do that. But if we're looking just for a screen for inflammatory responses, that tends to get things going. Even an A1C will help us. Keep in mind that an A1C at 5.5 can still lead to a non-alcoholic fatty liver. So even every test, I want to be very clear, and as we're looking at this, and this is my background that got me into this in the first place, was that not every test is 100% diagnostic. There are variables that go into it. This test is high, it can be this, and this. This test is low, it can be this, and this. And not everybody just has one condition. They could have multiple conditions, or they just may get lucky and have one. Good luck. I hope we find, excuse me, some people that just have one thing going wrong, and there has. It's not that everybody walks around with has something that's clinical or something that's sinister, or pathology or something that's going on. We have had some patients that they eat extremely clean. They do meditation. They keep their brain calm. They are financially independent. They do yoga and they work out, and they don't have any pain, and there's nothing clinically that's wrong with them, and you don't see them that often. And then you have somebody else that they do all the same things there, but they have an autoimmune condition or a leaky gut. And there are little things that maybe even 30 minutes of yoga as opposed to 10 minutes of yoga puts their body over physiological stress, and they create inflammatory responses. That sucks, but that happens. It happens a lot. So being able to find out what is going on, what we can do to help their balance, to keep them backing off. That's particularly why, even in our office, why I have to keep a certain amount of hours. We know that if I hit this certain threshold, we have blood tests that show, not just physically or mentally, we have blood tests that show that I don't do well. And so I have the lucky benefit of being able to say, hey, you know what, we keep the hours at this, and there's a reason why. It's to keep me in check. It's to keep me functional. It's to keep me at the best that I can be for where we're at. Because, hey, you know what? I know what most of my patients are going through very similar issues. So being able to understand what those tests really mean, what a false positive, what is false negative, I think it's vitally important. Our patients, really, they absolutely love it, because you're able to say, we've got this and this and this. And in some cases, if you go to a particular doctor and you got 10 things that are maybe not perfect, you might walk out with 10 medications, 10 supplements, 10 whatever. But what does that really mean? What's the treatment plan? Where's the follow-up? Where are you going to see when that's going to that? So if you're looking for something comprehensive, being able to explain so that you know, as if you're the doctor, what the blood work really means in your situation, from your history, from your exam, and you're looking for some detailed look into your case, this is what we focus on. We focus on you functioning, not only just physically. I want you to function chemically. I want you to function neurologically. I'm Dr. Trites. Be well.